Come and See is the war film people warn each other about. 140 minutes that don't simply depict the Second World War, they inflict it. The film traces a shell-shocked first-person descent into the Nazi annihilation of Belarus, marching a young boy into one side of a forest and back out the other side of hell. By the final frames, the war has aged the boy's face beyond recognition, an image that has made Elem Klimov's 1985 film emblematic of cinema at its most authentic, yet most unbearable. But what fewer people know is that it has a twin, or perhaps more accurately, an older sibling, made 8 years earlier by the wife of Come and See's director. Her name was Larisa Shepitko, and the film is The Ascent. Shepitko was born in 1938 in eastern Ukraine, in a city today called Bakhmut, sadly a frontline battleground for Russia's full-scale war on Ukraine. For Shepitko too, war was a lived childhood experience, but also one that was intertwined with family trauma. Her father, a military officer, abandoned her mother and 2 siblings when Shepitko was just an infant. In her own later recollections, she wrote, quote, "My father fought all through the war. To me, the war was one of the most powerful early impressions. I remember the feeling of life upset, the family separated. The impression of a global calamity certainly left an indelible mark in my child's mind." For Shepitko, cinema became her way out. At 19, she entered Moscow's State Film School under Alexander Dovzhenko, the founding poet of Ukrainian film, and she emerged a formidable talent, so much so that a fellow student, equally promising, helped her finish her punishing debut, Heat, in 1963, before they later married. That fellow student was indeed Come and See's director Elem Klimov. But the promising future swiftly became murky thanks to tightening Soviet restrictions on cultural expression. A decade of censorship and abandoned projects followed, and by the early 1970s, a fall had left Shepitko with a grave spinal injury. When she became pregnant shortly afterwards, she was warned that the injury meant that carrying the pregnancy to term could be fatal. But she chose to have the child regardless. Bedridden and facing her own mortality, she read the novel Sotnikov by the Belarusian author Vasil Bykov, and it inspired a decision about what her next project should be. Quote, "All motion pictures are personal, but the desire to film The Ascent was almost a physical need. If I had not shot this picture, it would have been a catastrophe for me." The Ascent of 1977 ticks all the Shepitko boxes: a brutal landscape, spiritual crisis, and wartime trauma. It follows 2 Soviet partisans in Nazi-occupied Belarus, the frail Sotnikov and the pugnacious Rybak, who are captured by Nazi collaborating forces and faced with a mortal ethical dilemma. Filming took place in January 1974 outside Moscow in temperatures 40 degrees below zero. Shepitko, still struggling with her spinal injury, had to be carried onto set by the actor Vladimir Gostyukin, who described the shoot as, quote, "death in every frame, but it was worth it to die in each scene in order to feel her gratitude." In The Ascent, everything that stands out against the white of the snow is somehow broken or crooked. Black overcoats, a dead tree, dismembered houses. The atmosphere this produces was described by critic Michael Koreski as, quote, "a physical and moral winter that envelops everything in its path." The kinship between the Ascent and Come and See is hard to miss. Come and See likewise unfolds in Nazi-occupied Belarus, and it too was drawn from the witness of a Belarusian who had fought the occupation as a young partisan. And although Shepitko's film is a winter of white death, whilst Klimov's is a summer of mud and fire, the moral universe is identical. No spectacle of glory, no valor or heroism, simply the human soul worn down until it breaks. Come and See earned its existence the hard way. Klimov spent the better part of a decade fighting to make it, the script repeatedly stalled by censors who judged its vision of the war too naturalistic and too bleak. Although such charges were similarly aimed at and nearly buried the Ascent, Shepitko's film was also almost banned for its religious overtones. Where Shepitko reached for the transcendent, casting the grown Boris Plotnikov as a martyr in the snow, Klimov reached for raw sensation, casting a teenage, non-professional Alexei Kravchenko, letting the film's horror age the boy's face into a mask over the course of the film. And it's this same very fixation on the human face pushed past endurance that haunts the Ascent. Come and See's raw material differed in kind. It was not from a novel as was The Ascent, but rather the recorded testimony of Belarusians who had survived the burning of their own villages, testimony gathered by Ales Adamovich into the 1977 Book of Witness, I Am From the Fiery Village. And where Shepitko dressed a Russian field to stand in for occupied Belarus, Klimov shot on the real soil in the native language. In this sense, both films were birthed from the same war and arrived at a version of the same horror, but simply did so via different routes. When Soviet censors were on the verge of banning the Ascent for its religiosity, Elem Klimov invited the first secretary of the Communist Party of Belarus, Pyotr Masharev, to an impromptu preview. Masharev had fought as a partisan in the war, and in 1942 his mother was hanged by the Nazis. And so he watched the film in tears, afterwards delivering a 40-minute speech in the screening hall in which he is reported to have asked, "Where did this girl come from, who experienced nothing of the sort, but knows all about it?" The Ascent was then accepted without revisions by the state, and later won the Golden Bear at the Berlin Film Festival. This was seemingly setting Shepitko up for a glorious third career act, but sadly that act never came. Shepitko and 4 members of her crew were tragically killed in a car crash in 1979 during location scouting. Klimov went on to complete his own version of the film she died developing, releasing later as Farewell. 6 years on from his wife's death, Klimov returned to the same war and the same occupied country she had explored in the Ascent to make Come and See. Whether or not he meant it as an answer to his wife's film, the two now unmistakably stand as one another's shadow, a winter and a summer amidst the very same hellscape. Both are undeniably masterpieces, landmarks of the form, and yet one is spoken of much more. The other, though, is still out there, in the snow, waiting. Right now, on Klassiki, you can stream our entire collection of Eastern European cinema for free as part of our 7-day free trial. This includes our curated collections, among them post-Soviet visions, banned classics, Ukrainian poetic cinema, and much, much more. Follow the link in the description to explore for yourself our full library of contemporary and classic titles from Eastern Europe and Central Asia.